Glory be to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dearly beloved ones, today we shall deal with the last session of our study with St. John's Gospel, which comprises of St. John chapter 21, verses 15 through 25. In verses 15 following, we read, "When they had eaten the breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' He said to him, 'Feed my lambs.' He said to him again a second time, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' He said to him, 'Tend my sheep.' He said to him the third time, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?' Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, 'Do you love me?' And he said to him, 'Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you.' Jesus said to him, 'Feed my sheep. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish.' This he spoke, signifying but by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, 'Follow me.'" This is the passage. This is a scene which must have been printed forever on the mind of Peter. First, we must note the question which Jesus asked Peter, "Simon, son of Jonas, do you love me more than these?" As far as the language goes, that can mean two things equally well. First is, it may be that Jesus swept his hand around the boat and its nets and the equipments and the catch of fishes and said to Peter, "Simon, do you love me more than these things? Are you prepared to give them all up, to abandon all hope of a successful career, to give up a steady job and a reasonable comfort in order to give yourself forever for my people and to my work?" This may have been a challenge to Peter to take the final decision to give all his life to the preaching of the gospel and the caring of Christ's folk. But it may be that Jesus looked at the rest of the little group of the disciples and said to Peter, "Simon, do you love me more than these your fellow disciples?" It may be that Jesus was looking back to a night when Peter said, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." In Matthew 26:33 we read that. It may be that he was generally reminding Peter how once he had thought that he alone could be true and how his courage had failed. It is more likely that this second meaning is right because in his answer, Peter does not make comparisons anymore. He is content simply to say, "You know that I love you." Secondly, we see that Jesus is asking the question three times. There was a reason for that. It was three times that Peter denied his Lord. It was three times that his Lord gave him the chance to affirm his love. Jesus, in his gracious forgiveness, gave Peter the chance to wipe out the memory of the threefold denial by a threefold declaration of love. Also, we must note what love brought Peter. It brought Peter a task. "If you love me, then give your life to shepherding the sheep and the lambs of my flock." We can prove that we love Jesus only by loving others. Love is the greatest privilege in the world, but it brings the greatest responsibility too. Secondly, it brought Peter a cross. Jesus said to him, "When you are young, you choose where you will go, but the day will come when they will stretch out your hands on a cross and you will be taken on a way you did not choose. Before we coming to that point, we have to note that while Jesus asking Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" it has got a twofold significance. Firstly, Peter was the leader among the disciples, and thus he had to be the first to confess his love for the risen Lord. Secondly, Peter had denied Christ 3 times. We have already mentioned that. And here Christ is restoring him with a threefold confession of love. It is important to note that the use of the words for love is different in all these 3 instances. When first 2 times when Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" the word for love in Greek that Jesus uses is agape. Agape denotes the highest form of sacrificial and self-emptying love, unconditional love, without seeking anything in return. That is the divine love that Jesus is demanding from Peter. That is the love of God has for man, and that man can develop only through maturing in God's grace. But Peter is unable to claim such a lofty love. When Peter gives the answer, "You know that I love you," the word that Peter uses is philo. That is a lesser form of love. That is akin to the brotherly love. That is what the word philo is used for. When Jesus asked for the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" Jesus himself has changed the word from agape to philo, condescending to Peter's weakness and accepting whatever love Peter is able to offer. Nevertheless, Jesus knows that Peter will develop agape love for him one day for sure, as Peter will eventually accept martyrdom for his sake. Peter was grieved both that the Lord had to condescend to his level of love, and that this was a clear though gentle reference to his 3 denials. Now, coming back to where we have stopped, Jesus saying, "Peter, when you are young, you choose where you will go, but the day will come when they stretch out your hands on a cross and you will be taken on a way you did not choose." Jesus is here giving a second prophecy of Peter's martyrdom. Peter had to suffer martyrdom under Nero. We see that in AD 67, Peter was crucified under the reign of Nero upside down. He did die for his Lord in Rome. He went to the cross and he asked to be nailed to it head downwards, for he said that he was not worthy to die as his Lord has died. Love brought Peter a task, and it brought him a cross. Love always involves responsibility, and it always involves sacrifice, a self-denial, unconditional love. Of course, Peter gives back what Jesus asked him for, that is agape. We do not really love Christ unless we are prepared to face his task and take up his cross. Moving forward to verse 20 to 24, we see Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also had leaned on his breast at the supper, and said, Lord, who is the one who betrays you? Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, But Lord, what about this man? What will happen to him? Jesus said to him, If I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Then this saying went out among the brethren, that this disciple, that is John, would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? Saint John is making a clear statement here on the background that a false notion was spread among the fellow disciples that he would die. And it is very clear that he died at a very old age. He must have lived on until the report went around that he was going to go on living until Jesus came again. Now, just as the previous passage assigned to Peter his place in the scheme of things, this passage assigns to John his place. It was his function to be preeminently the witness to Christ. People in the early church must have made their comparison. They must have pointed out how Paul went away to the ends of the earth. They must have pointed out how Peter went here and there shepherding his people. And then they may have wondered what was the function of John, who had lived on in Ephesus until he was so old that he was past all activity. And there was a misconception going around the disciples that he would not die until Jesus come again. Early Christians marveled at his longevity, and some thought he would not die before the return of Christ. He died at the age of 100 in around AD 98 and 108. Here John corrects this assumption by clarifying that Jesus did not say to him that he would not die. Now, people wondered what was the function of John. And the answer is, Paul might be the pioneer of Christ, Peter might be the shepherd of Christ, but John was the witness of Christ. He was the man who was able to say, I saw these things and I know that they are true. This is the role of Saint John in Jesus' mission. He was the true witness of Christ. To this day, the final argument for Christianity is Christian experience. To this day, the Christian is the man who can say, I know Jesus Christ and I know that these things are true. So then, this gospel takes two of the great figures of the church, Peter and John. To each, Jesus had given his function. It was Peter's to shepherd the sheep of Christ and in the end to die for him. It was John's to witness to the story of Christ and to live to a great old age and to come to an end in peace. That did not make them rivals in honor and prestige, nor make the one greater or lesser than the other. It made them both servants of Christ. Let a man serve Christ where Christ has set him. As Jesus said to Peter, never mind the task that is given to you, someone else. Your job is to follow me. That is what he still says to each one of us. Our glory is never in comparison with other men. Our glory is the service of Christ in whatever capacity he has allotted to us. Coming to the final verse, verse 25, we read, there are many things that Jesus did, which if they were written by one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. In this last chapter, the writer of the fourth gospel has set before the church, for whom he wrote certain great truths. He has reminded them of the reality of resurrection. He has reminded them of the universality of the church. He has reminded them that Peter and John are not competitors in honor, but that Peter is the great shepherd and John the great witness. Now, he comes to the end and he comes there thinking once again of the splendor of Jesus Christ. Whatever we know of Christ, we have only grasped a fragment of him. Whatever wonders we have experienced, they are nothing. They are as nothing to the wonders which we may yet to experience. Acknowledging his gospel contains only a fraction of Christ's life. John has written his book to bring his hearers to faith, while the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke contain many more miracles and parables. These two are far from exhaustive. This verse not only emphasizes the holiness of what was written, but also points to the ongoing oral tradition within the church. That is what we see in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 15. Oral tradition is being continuing in the church, which is equally important and holy as what is written in the Bible. That is why the Orthodox Church regard that the tradition is to be given equal significance as the Holy Bible. Now, whatever we know of Christ, we have only grasped a fragment of him. Human categories are powerless to describe Christ, and human books are inadequate to hold him. So John ends up with the innumerable triumphs, the inexhaustible power, and the limitless grace of Jesus Christ. With this, we conclude our study of St. John's Gospel, giving thanks to God Almighty for enabling us to complete this book this far. There are many more limitless phantom of things that we have to delve into in order to have a perfect understanding of St. John's Gospel. You should not stop reading the Gospel. Try to read it again and again so that God may reveal the wonderful truths that is being hidden and latent in this book. May God bless you abundantly. We shall start with a new session in the coming weeks. May God bless you all.